Alright, number 10. This game, this Final Fantasy, is Final Fantasy Darja de Cerberus. Now, why it is number 10 is that the game didn't quite hold up because of storyline. It just didn't quite entice me into the game. It still hasn't. I still don't quite understand the mechanics of the game. But it was great because of graphic-wise. It was great because it was a shooter. And it was something different take on a different Final Fantasy game. And that's why I like Darja de Cerberus 10. Now, number 9 is Final Fantasy Final Fantasy Crisis Core. Now, it's actually Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core if you want to be specific. But I always called it Crisis Core, but I didn't like it because in battle you had this mechanic where you had this thing roll in the gameplay and it would give you a certain power, and I just didn't like it. I liked it that you could attack people and miss the battle, like fight it, like beat them up, and you still had a battle, but it was you could beat them up. I also didn't like it, but number 8. Now this Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy X-2. I didn't like the game because of its richness and storyline. Because of its richness in that sense, but I also liked it because you could also still be change out of battle, and graphics were great. It was notorious for it, but I just didn't like the storyline. The storyline just didn't keep me enticed to continue to keep playing the game. Still haven't played this to this day. But number 7 on this list is Final Fantasy V. I love Final Fantasy V at number 7. The reason why it is because it's just a little bit of the graphics was part of it. The other part of it was the storyline. Didn't quite get into it. Didn't quite understand it. But the reason why it's on this list is because I love the job system. I love that you could play and change your job. I loved the characters were great. It was just that the storyline just didn't quite entice me to continue to keep playing. But as of number 6. The next Final Fantasy game is Final Fantasy 13. The game was great. I enjoyed it. I always wanted a game that you could actually have turn-based, but you could actually know your characters, what's coming up and what to battle, but not how many. But I enjoyed it because of that. But it was just the storyline was a little bit too linear, and the graphics were great. It was enough to keep me wanting to continue to keep playing this game, even though I haven't beat it yet. Also, the next Final Fantasy here, which is at number 5, and I'm gonna let you guys figure this out here. Now, if you guys haven't figured this Final Fantasy out, this is the game that came out before Final Fantasy X-2 that I had sitting up here at number 8. Now, Final Fantasy V, I loved the intro to the game. I love it, and that's what you guys are watching right now, is I loved the intro. Loved the soundtrack. I also loved that Final Fantasy X, you could also switch out your characters. But I just didn't like Blitzball. Blitzball was the only thing that I didn't quite like, because it was something that I didn't understand. I also didn't like how you had to change Lulu between that you had to change Lulu out for Tidus to kill a certain character, or change out Tidus for Lulu to kill out a certain character. I also liked how I love the save points. I loved how that you could start listening to the voices of the characters. The voices just made it really enticing. Just as like in this intro when Tidus is talking to you, and if you guys can might be able to hear it in the background, but you know, the game was very well thought out. It was that I loved the graphics, as I said before. The soundtrack was really good, heavy metal soundtrack, really good. Nobuo Uematsu is one of my favorite composers for games like this.
Listen to my story. This may be our last chance.
And did you know that you just recently heard Titus was speaking? That's the part right there that I like to listen with Final Fantasy X. That was one of the why it's sitting at number 5. Just a few small little things I didn't like. I loved the Saphir Grid. I loved it. It's one of those great mechanics I love. Everything else was great. Just the storyline was great. Just the Blitzball and the switching out characters, but you know, that I can deal with. As if sitting at number 4, which is Final Fantasy, that I'm gonna let you guys figure this out. I'm gonna let you guys sit here and figure it out for a second here. Alright, now Final Fantasy 7, if you guys haven't figured this out yet, is why is it not at number 1? Why shouldn't it be at number 1? Well, because Final Fantasy 7 just didn't entice me to with the materia that I snacked on fire. I gain better in magic, but I lose my strength. When I slapped on something, I don't know, I haven't played it the whole way through. I haven't found every materia. Ones that gave me strength, if there's ones that gave me strength, but I would lose my magic, I enjoyed. But I just didn't like that I would lose my materia, that I would lose that power with the materia. And I also liked it that the storyline was great. I loved it when I loved the dating scene in this game. I loved it how they went up to the Golden Saucer and played it. Now, it's not the end of the game. I haven't played the end of the game yet, but some little piece of information through Final Fantasy VII is that it would fit. It would be 36 cartridges if it was on the Nintendo 64, and it just didn't have the capability of being able to switch it out. That's a little piece of information. The other things I liked about this game was the great soundtrack, great character play. I love the great characters in this game. I also loved the great intro that you guys are watching, that you watched in 10 as well. And I just loved it. It was just a great game, just a few little flaws in it, but that's why I hit number 4. But if you hit number 3, this next Final Fantasy, I'm going to let you guys figure this out for yourself. You guys should know this by now, but you guys will figure it out. Now, if you haven't figured out what Final Fantasy this is Final Fantasy 9. Now, it's sitting at number 3. It's not number 1. But the reasons why it sitting here is the card system. That's the only thing I didn't like about it. This game was the card system. It didn't quite draw me or entice me to continue to play this game because I wanted a card system that you could actually earn something. A mini game that you could actually earn. 10, you had to play Blitzball and earn something, but I just didn't like that part of it because of other things. But we've off onto a little tangent there. But I also liked the enjoy of the soundtrack, the way that you could save out in fields, the way that you could save. I loved shops. I love how they brought back where you could play as a white mage or you could play as, certain characters had that. That you could play as a white mage or black mage had that. I loved the storyline is intriguing. I only got about disc 1, completed about disc 1. Disc 2. I only got to about disc 2. I loved how that you got to capture a princess. That's why it's sitting in number 3 is because you got to capture a princess. And it's like, I loved it because I felt like I was in the game myself. Most of all these Final Fantasy games, I felt like I am in the game myself. And that's why I enjoyed the game. I also enjoyed that Steiner is trying to get the princess back to the castle when she really actually wanted to be captured. And that's why I liked this game, because of that. The only other flaw that I found out about this game was besides the card system, I didn't quite understand, because I just didn't quite understand the card system, and that's the only thing I really found that was bad in this game. That's the only thing. because you didn't receive any items, you didn't receive like a potion or anything from playing these games. It was something to pass the time, but I just didn't like it. The graphics were great for Final Fantasy IX, loved it, just could have been a little bit better. It was very great, it's just, I haven't been able to figure out it on PC yet, because I just got it, but I haven't been able to figure it out yet, because it hasn't been able to get it to work to get it into play. But, you know, we'll come back to, you know, the next Final Fantasy. Not coming back to that, but next Final Fantasy is on number 2 here is Final Fantasy that I'm gonna let you guys guess. You guys should figure this out. I will give it to you here in a second. Now, this Final Fantasy 12, this intro was one that I really enjoyed the most. This is the most this was the most part of the game that I liked, was the intro. The intro was great. Loved it. Loved it that it showed you a little bit about the game before you started playing. I loved the lens board. Most people don't realize that I liked the lens board. It was great lens board, and you know, you got to have other people learn different material, different items, that you could make them learn that they could use different items, but one's just better than another. And that's why Final Fantasy XII was great here as well. The battle system was great. I loved it. But the only part of this game that I did not like was the battle system. There was a small part in the battle system I did not like, and that was the ATB, when you actually had to go in and actually attack, but you had to wait to attack. I wish it was more like hack and slash type of deal that they could have done. They could have done it really well, but the soundtrack was really great for the game. It just didn't have the battle theme, but you know, it had a boss theme, so I was happy. I also liked how that the storyline kept enticing me into the game. Just that it just doesn't quite like that. Didn't quite understand it, but you know, it's because it's part of my disability, because I have autism. You know, because of part of this disability, it makes it harder for me to understand things. Anyway, so I have to take that lesson into consideration. But I loved how the characters kept keeping me going into the game. As I'm going to wrap things up for this here, is that Final Fantasy 12 was very, very great. It didn't have a mini game, but you got a quest. You got quests to do, and I loved how you could do the quest as a side thing. I loved it, but it was just that battle system, that little battle system, that little part, just that where you had to sit and wait to attack. I just didn't like it. That was the only small part. That's why Final Fantasy 12 doesn't make number 1. Now, we're going to move on to our honorable mentions here. These honorable mentions didn't make it because of graphics or stuff, but Final Fantasy Dysnodia was such an okay game. I didn't quite understand it. Final Fantasy Tactics was okay, but these games just didn't make it because of many things, and I cannot explain too much about it, because right now we're on to number 1. My all-time favorite Final Fantasy game, and I'm going to let you guys listen and figure out what game this is. Now, if you haven't figured this out, it is Final Fantasy VIII. Now, a lot of people say that Final Fantasy VIII is not one of their great games, that 7 is their best. Final Fantasy VIII is great because I loved how you didn't have to go and buy magic, but you had to sit and wait in battle to draw it. I actually enjoyed it. I didn't care if I had to sit and wait in battle to draw. It got a little bit boring after a while, but you know, I enjoyed it just because it was something to sit and do, rather than just sitting and attacking and defending myself, trying to do so. And trying to find all these different GFs and equip them, and got to put magic into slots that you could increase your player, could increase it to protect that player from magic. to protect them. And I loved it. It just did. That's why 7 just didn't quite get for me. That's why it's not number 1. Because of that part. That I lost strength. I lost something in place of gaining something. In this game, you don't lose something, you gain something from it. But, except for the final battle, you'll lose something at that. But, that's just a little thing to help for if you're looking for a guide or something, you know. I will be doing some Final Fantasy, some of the Final Fantasy games on my channel. But right now, I love the storyline, love the entire soundtrack. The only reason, there's only one slight problem that I didn't like was Blue Fields, the outer part of the game in the world. Just didn't like it. I loved this intro. It shows the whole entire game. I loved how Seifer and Squall are righteous enemies. No, not righteous enemies. That they're together. That they're rivals. They're rivals throughout this game. As I'm trying to point it here. That they're great. I loved how the game has a rival where it starts out that you guys come from the same school. That this game just makes you come from the same school and you go into rival. I'm not giving any spoilers out because that's really in the starting of the game. You actually see that in the beginning of the game. I don't like to give out endings or anything, but another helpful tip is if I go find all the GFs, just try to find them all. There is an extensive guide out there, but if you decide you want to play the game without trying to hide that, just go play the game. Just try to get enough to just make sure that you find all the GFs before and draw from boss fights. Check them. That's the only thing I'm going to say. Just always draw from boss fights to get through that. So this is why Final Fantasy VIII is number 1, because of story, graphics, gameplay, everything, soundtrack, whatever. I loved it. Well, we're going to say that Gaming Jesus, that I'm going to be signing out here. So Gaming Jesus Rocks, we'll see you later.